we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to our Season 6 preview episode of the 2021 Pitt football season. We'll take a look at Pitt football overall, and then we'll get into a national preview as well. So we went through the offseason, of course. We started things off with our recruiting class. Very, very solid recruiting class. No 5 stars, but a very solid class through and through. A lot of talent and some players that will definitely play a role as we get into this coming season. We then had our off-season progression where we saw Calvin Carlson and Talik Bridges, a couple of linebackers, get a nice role that will allow them to progress. They got the rub of the green and progressed to 90 and 80 overall respectively, while we did see a few declines and a few players that are probably relegated to nothing more than depth positions. Xavier Godfrey got hit with the biggest decrease in a -9, takes him down to 67 overall. Tyquan Sutton got hurt with a -7, which actually wasn't a huge deal for us because he was going to redshirt this year anyways, but it is still a bit of a disappointment. Starting right guard Ryan Henry lost 2 overall. A couple of true freshmen did get hit. Austin Penny lost 2. Aubrey St. Solomon lost 2. Jacob Laughlin lost 3, our starting free safety, so he dips back below 90. And Jay Ballmer, who goes from second, maybe third string tight end to definite third string tight end, loses 5 and drops to 76 overall. If we take a look at our 2 deep now, following those progressions, we can see we have 8 returning starters offensively. Our entire wide receiver core is back. 2 senior running backs. Todd Sibley, I have him listed under fullback there, but it's just because I wanted to be able to show 3 halfbacks on the graphic. AC Reese will start at quarterback. I mean, he's a solid player. He's got very good throwing stats. I think 89 throw power, 87 accuracy, something of that nature. So he's a good player, got a good arm. His awareness is solid, but he's been hit or miss when he's been in games, and he's going to be the real key to our offense because if you look at things, offensive line, very good, if not very, very good. Tight end, we have a solid contributor. Our receivers are great. Running backs are fantastic. Davion Reynolds is going to be an impact player as an 85 overall freshman, and he's the 3rd best halfback on the team. And then we follow that up, of course, with AC Reese, the quarterback, 91 overall, but it remains to be seen how he'll play for us this year. On the defensive side of the football, again, very solid, though definitely not as well-rounded as the offense is, of course. Our starters, though, very good. We do have a bit of a drop-off in a few of our depth positions defensively, but our starters are still good. You can see a couple of solid players on the defensive line. Malachi Bordeaux shifting over to defensive tackle should be very good. Ronnie Baker at defensive end is well-rounded and a great player. I think he could be the new Sean Wolfgang. And then we should see some good progression out of Ryan Jacobs at defensive tackle in his sophomore year. Linebacker is going to be the big question for us. Of course, Calvin Carlson, we know, moved outside linebacker. Moved back to middle linebacker because Quell Hampshire became a starting outside linebacker. Darion Mitchell finally gets in a starting role. How those guys play are likely going to replicate, or how our team does this season. Our secondary is pretty much the exact same as last year. Scott Whaley just moves to an outside corner position, so I think he's going to be very solid, and the defense will be probably as good as last year, but remains to be seen as long as our linebackers can compete. Of course, Johnny Midday, our new kicker, Eric Fox still at punter, and Davion Reynolds expected to be our kick returner this season, and I think he's going to have a good year for us. We do get to reveal our schedule here with this beautiful schedule graphic. We have one Thursday night game against Georgia Tech on November 4th. Otherwise, we pretty much just alternate away and home for the entirety of the season. Tennessee, Temple, UCLA, and Maryland are going to be our non-conference games this season. We do get Syracuse and NC State in our cross-divisional games this year, so it should be very, very exciting to get to take on those teams. We then get into our college football preview, the Athlon Sports College Football Preview, one that I read year in and year out. Always love the covers they provide, and they got Jay Keys, Pitt star receiver, on the cover as we take a look around the ACC and around the rest of college football this season. So we advance to the regular season. So excited to finally get this year going. This episode is going to cover our NCAA preview as well as our Week 1 preview so we can get things started. Now in the Big 12, We did decide to move 2 teams to the Big 12, giving them the opportunity to have a conference championship game. Houston and SMU move into the Big 12. That means all the Texas schools will be in the Southwestern Conference Division. All the non-Texas schools will be in the Big 8 division. So that means the Big 12 will have a conference championship game this year. We've also got some transfers. Most notable, Al Dingle loses out on the starting job in Oklahoma to Taylor Savage. That means he's going to move to Oregon. Jack Nicholson, after losing his job to Carter Ford, will go from Georgia to North Carolina. Plenty of good puns to be had there. I'm sure we'll see when we play them later in the year. Zach Anderson goes from Michigan to Mizzou. Plenty of movement here. You can see if your favorite team made any kind of move by looking at things. Michael Lowry, big player to watch there, from Stanford, going to Ohio State to immediately become their starting halfback this year as well. And a number of teams that will be playing brought in some transfers this year. Alabama tops the preseason polls as number 1 in the country. The one team in this top 10 that I think is a little bit sketchy is Houston there at number 3. They lost so many players in the offseason. They did get a transfer from Donation Lanu, huge, unbelievable halfback from LSU. I think he's 93 overall as a sophomore. But he has to sit out this season because of the transfer, so that means that they're not going to be able to use him this year, and so I think they may struggle heavily in their first season over in the Big 12. You can see, we'll take a look pretty much at every team in the preseason rankings here. Clemson was number 2 in the country. Alabama, of course, was number 1. We came in at number 8, and there are a few teams that had pretty solid rankings that will be playing. UCLA was in the top 10. They're going to be very good this year. Tennessee, I think, was just outside the top 25. They're like 27 or 28, something of that nature. So our non-conference schedule is actually pretty strong. Maryland's a decent team. They got a couple of transfers in the offseason. They have a new quarterback and a new running back via transfers. They got Eric Torres from Baylor to be their starting running back, and they got, I think it was Derek Muhammad from Ole Miss, transferred over to Maryland to become their starting quarterback. He's very good. I think 91 overall. Doesn't run particularly well, but he's got a great arm and should make them very, very tough to play against. So I really like our non-conference schedule. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to be able to play against some of these teams, and it's going to make things a challenge for sure as we get into this season. So there's a look at your preseason, all 126 team preview. Now we'll take a look throughout the conferences, see how things are projected. We are projected to win the Coastal Division, but it could be a toss-up, really. Virginia Tech's a good team. Miami's good. North Carolina's very good. From there, it's a little bit of a drop-off. Georgia Tech has a new coach after firing Lane Kiffin last season. Duke has a new coach after Cutcliffe retired, and Virginia will probably struggle, but Miami's very good. Their offense is fantastic. Virginia Tech is well-rounded. North Carolina's got a very good offense. Yet again, they always seem to do so, and they give us problems. In the Atlantic side of the conference, Clemson, no doubt the favorites, though there are, again, a couple of teams with a lot of talent this year. Louisville was very good last season. Florida State always has a lot of talent, even if they seem to underachieve in the division. And a sleeper team that I want everybody to watch out for is Syracuse. Their offense is spectacular. I think they have 2 or 3 receivers over 90 overall. Their halfbacks are good, and their quarterback, a redshirt sophomore, is an absolute stud. So I think they are a team to watch this season. We'll find out very quickly if they're for real, because we'll be taking them on later in the season, or early in the season, I actually should say. It'll be our first conference game this year. Another sleeper to watch, probably the best group of 5 team, is Cincinnati. They're projected, I think, 3rd in the American we saw there, but they are fantastic. PJ Fleck is their head coach, and I think they're going to be a very, very formidable team this year. And if they can run the gauntlet in their non-conference schedule, I think they could go undefeated. The Big 12, likely, if you had to pick the favorites, would be Oklahoma versus Texas in their conference championship game, but they do play each other this season, so one of them will have a loss, and it remains to be seen if they'll be able to make that a reality. But those are probably the clear best 2 teams in the Big 12. The Big 10 East, Penn State won the conference last year. They're currently the favorite, but both Michigan and Ohio State have a ton of talent. Michigan will be starting a true freshman, Miles Bigsby, at running back, and Steve Tate, their quarterback, is one of the best in the country, might have the best arm in the entire country. Ohio State got a great transfer in Michael Lowry. Brian Barbour, their quarterback, coming back as a returning starter. They're going to be very, very good yet again. and I think they could challenge Penn State, and honestly, I would put them ahead of them if I was doing my own projections. Big Ten West, Northwestern is the favorite, though I don't think they have the talent. Nebraska, clearly the most talented team in this field. Wisconsin, probably a runner-up. I think the sleeper team to watch here is Purdue. They have one of the best halfbacks in the country in sophomore Caden Mitchell, 97 speed. I think he's 94 overall. It's just a sophomore. He's unbelievable, and he could be huge for them. They also have a pretty good quarterback. They got a transfer at receiver as well. They're going to be a solid team offensively this year and could definitely surprise some teams, if not just pull a couple of upsets. Conference USA, Middle Tennessee State, Marshall, teams like that, probably your favorites in the Conference USA East. Over on the West, Rice is the favorite to repeat as conference champions, and I think they could pull that off this year. Independence, the real team to focus on is Notre Dame, of course, 93 overall, so they're very solid, 97 offensively. Army will be good, of course, by virtue of their option offense, and we could expect to see another solid year from them. I think in the MAC, Miami or Ohio, not Miami of Ohio, but Miami or Ohio are probably your top two teams there, and the teams you could expect to come away with a MAC title. Of course, Miami won it last year. Ohio won it the year previously, and they'll both be very good this year. Mountain West, I think the Mountain Division is probably where you'll get your champion from in Boise State. I like them a lot in this conference, although if I did have to pick one team that's my deep favorite and one that obviously I just like the team, and I think they'll be very good, Hawaii has low-key the best offense in that conference and one of the best in the country. They have a fantastic quarterback, and I think they're going to be very good and surprise some teams. 86 overall, that they are 90 overall offense, so they're going to be very, very good. The Pac-12 should be fantastically competitive. You got a number of 4 top 25 teams in there, and Stanford even projected 5th in the North. They're 93 overall with a 97 offense. They could be very, very good. Cal's still going to be good. Washington will be good. Oregon will be good. Oregon State, you may see a bit of a regression from them this year, but who knows what could happen. They were incredible last year with a pretty low overall as well. On the South, it's a bit weaker. UCLA, pretty much the clear favorite. USC maybe could challenge them, but they're having a bit of a down roster this season. Quarterback's a big question mark for them, and so we'll see how things turn out. Over in the SEC East, Florida led by one of the top players in the country, Clint Franklin at quarterback. They're going to be very, very good. I think Georgia's due for a resurgence. South Carolina is always very good, and Tennessee has a talented team. So it's hard to tell who can come out of here. The SEC West, it's even harder to tell. I think they have 4 teams that are 97 to 99 overall. Auburn even is projected 5th. They're a team that's always very, very good, but then you got Alabama, Texas A&M, LSU, all 99 overalls, who are going to be unbelievable teams and tough to compete against. Sunbelt, Arkansas State pretty much wins this year in and year out. UL Lafayette, I think, will give them the biggest challenge, but Arkansas State, led by senior quarterback T.C. Ford, are going to be very good yet again. So it's very exciting to see how things will shake out. Heisman race, Dustin Young, the quarterback from Ole Miss, and Clint Franklin, the quarterback from Florida. We mentioned already 2 guys that are going to be spectacular this year. Jay Keys in the Heisman consideration, of course, because of everything he does for the Panthers. Anthony Riggs, the halfback from Clemson, and Ian Welsh, the halfback from Army, also expected to put up big numbers this year. You can see Young was very good last year, and where he really shined was he had 13 rushing touchdowns last year. So if he can put up numbers like that again this year, that's the kind of statistics that the Heisman voters fawn over. Clint Franklin ran for more yards. Look at that, 850 rushing yards as a quarterback last year, almost 6 yards a carry, in addition to his great passing stats. So he's very good. Of course, we know what Jay Keys can do. He had 7 rushing touchdowns last year, I think 16 receiving touchdowns, and he threw a couple of touchdowns as well. So he can do it all for the Panthers. I expect another big year out of him. Anthony Riggs had 19 touchdowns for Clemson last year, including 6 receiving. He'll be very good. And Ian Welsh ran for 1,600 yards, 16 touchdowns for Army last year, and should be poised for another big year in their option offense. Finally, we'll get into our Week 1 preview here. We'll show you all the games. We don't normally do this just because normally there's a lot of games in a week, and so we can't just show you every game that's going on, but we give you a quick scroll through all the games that will be taking place this week. Look at that Hawaii game down there at 11:45. That should be a fun one. Michigan will be hosting Arkansas in what should be a good challenge for the Wolverines. They have a lot of talent, but Arkansas has a good young quarterback, Jason Reddick, very solid player. It'll be a first test for an inexperienced Michigan offense. Steve Tate at quarterback, Miles Bigsby at halfback, but I like the Wolverines in that one. Then you have Wisconsin heading to Seattle to take on the Washington Huskies. Should be a great game with 2 talented teams. Washington actually got the #1 quarterback recruit Tristan Richards as their backup quarterback, the freshman. behind Casey Pearson. Will be interesting to see if he can wiggle away any time, but I like the Huskies in that one. Navy will take on Texas A&M in the Texas Classic. Should be a great neutral site game, even though it's not very neutral when Texas A&M will be playing in it. But should be an interesting matchup. I would like Texas A&M in that one. Ole Miss will take on Nebraska in the Cowboys Classic from Jerry World. Nebraska has the better team in this one, but Mississippi probably has the best player in general in quarterback Dustin Young, and I think he might win the game for them. And finally, our game of the week, Georgia, led by quarterback Carter Ford, the sophomore, and a pretty talented Georgia offense going up against an Alabama team that, other than the fact that they're starting a sophomore quarterback in Matt Perry, that's their biggest question mark, because the rest of their team is stellar. 2 really good halfbacks, great receivers, their line's incredible. Defensively, they're very, very stout. It's hard to find a weakness there, but if their quarterback play isn't up to snuff, then they could be upset, but Alabama's probably the favorite in that one. ACC games, UMass Boston College, a little Massachusetts rivalry matchup. North Carolina and East Carolina will do battle. Rice will take on Wake Forest, and Tulane will head to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech to kick off the ACC slate of games in week 1, but nothing terribly exciting in this matchup. We'll do a little bit of a schedule reveal for your Pitt Panthers. We do take on Tennessee in our season opener at Neyland Stadium. That's going to be a fantastic matchup in week 2. Then we'll return home to take on Temple in our home opener, a little bit of an old Big East rivalry matchup before going away to Byrd Stadium to take on Maryland in College Park in week 3. Should be a good matchup against a renewed Maryland squad. We'll come back home to take on Syracuse for the first time in this dynasty. That's going to be a really fun one. Excited to see their team in action, their great offense. Then we'll head to take on North Carolina State in a rematch of the ACC championship game from a few years ago. Come back home to take on UCLA in what's the marquee matchup on our schedule, but we'll see where both of those teams stand when we finally get to week 7. As it stands right now, though, it's a top 10 matchup, so it should be a lot of fun. Then we'll go away to Lane Stadium to take on Virginia Tech in Blacksburg in a game that's always very tough. Virginia Tech usually plays us very well. We'll return home to take on Virginia the week following that. Virginia, we've gotten the best of pretty much every game in this dynasty, and I would expect us to do the same. They shouldn't be particularly formidable this year. We'll then have a bye week, and following our bye week, we'll have a Thursday night football game against Georgia Tech. I know the time's screwed up there. It says 12:30 p.m. We'll make sure that we turn that into a night game for this matchup, because it is a Thursday night football game, but it says 12:30 for whatever reason, so we'll make sure that's set to like 8 p.m. or something like that. Then we'll come back home, take on Duke at 12:30 p.m., our penultimate home game, second to last home game of the season against a upstart Duke team that, probably won't present too much of a challenge, but still should be a fun matchup. Following that, we'll have our final road game against a very, very talented North Carolina squad. That should be a very fun game as well. Excited to take on the Tar Heels. And then finally, we'll come back home and take on Miami for senior night in a game that could potentially decide the ACC Coastal Division picture, as it has in a few different years in this dynasty, just because Miami always fields a very good team. So let me know, if you look at the schedule, what game you're most excited for in that schedule. I'd likely guess it's UCLA, but some folks might be excited to see Syracuse finally. There's definitely some good matchups that should be a lot of fun. Maryland I'm looking forward to, just because the uniform matchup is always spectacular. So it should be a very, very fun season coming up. And finally, we're going to spoil you guys here a little bit to wrap things up. We'll give you an early look at our recruiting board. Of course, I focused on that in the last episode, showed you the players we were looking at. Now I'm showing you the guys that we're actually explicitly putting points into. Of course, this could change week in, week out. You can see my house rules was, I said there's one player I can do 700 points on. Nobody else can have more than 600. I haven't even hit the 700 on a single recruit yet. We're kind of waiting and seeing how recruiting shapes out in the first week, because there's so many roster spots we're going to need to fill. I mentioned we have 19 seniors on the team this year, so very senior heavy, which means we're going to have 20 scholarships that we can hand out this year. That's a ton of players. We only have 35 guys on the recruiting board, and some of them are duplicates just to try and make sure we fill a certain position, which means we don't even want necessarily all of them. So we could sign almost everybody on this recruiting board. I'm sure there will be a few guys that don't want to come here. There's going to be guys that send their interest elsewhere and that we just aren't able to convince or have the points to be able to sway them to come to Pittsburgh. So you can see where we're currently throwing our points right now. Obviously, that'll change week in and week out. I won't necessarily put points on or show the recruiting board every week. I usually show when there's commitments and we can scout guys after they commit, of course. But beyond that, I probably won't show the recruiting board all of the time. I wanted to give you guys just a note on the guys that we're currently focused on, who we're trying to bring in, and where we're showing our interest. Of course, we need a punter. That's our first and foremost target. We need linebackers. That's going to be a huge key for us. And we have a lot of defensive players that we're spotlighting just because that's where we're losing a lot of talent and where we're going to need to fill positions. We have a ton of receivers already, so I think there's only 1 or 2 guys that can play receiver that I'm looking at. We have a bunch of halfbacks, although we have 2 seniors graduating, so I did spotlight at least 1 halfback, and we'll see if we're able to bring them in. No quarterbacks on our board at all. Just because AC Reese, as long as he comes back for his senior year, we'll still have 4 quarterbacks on the board for next season. And even if he didn't come back for whatever reason, if he has a great year and declares for the draft, we'll still have 3 quarterbacks. So quarterback not a primary focus for us this year, but we'll see how things go. Recruiting is always tough, especially when you have to focus on so many players. That's going to present probably our biggest challenge recruiting-wise, because I have all the house rules in place and the fact that we have to sign so many players this year. We'll have a big class, but we'll see how deep it actually ends up being. So let me know what guys on the recruiting board you think look the most exciting and who we should really be going after. Should we change up who we're focusing on based on what you saw there from how my points are allocated? What do you think is going to happen week 1 of college football? And give me your projections. Who's going to win the national championship this year? Will it be your Pitt Panthers finally getting there, or will it be someone else based on this preview? So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt, and we'll see you in our week 2 preview as we get the season underway.